Well, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today, Saving Time on Creating Worship Folders with Lutheran Service Builder. This is an overview webinar, and so we'll be covering basically all areas that you need to get started with Lutheran Service Builder. My name is Peter Frank. I am the Senior Manager of Marketing here at Concordia Publishing House. I work with our church supplies group, and that includes a variety of different products, including our software, such as Lutheran Service Builder. I also work with our church administration software like Shepherd Staff and Church 360, our music team, and a variety of others. And so I'm well versed in our products. I'm not an expert at all of them, but I do feel very comfortable with Lutheran Service Builder, and part of that's because it's a very easy tool to use. So you've seen my contact information on the screen. My email address is probably the best way to reach me, although you can also call my office number here, and if I'm not there, I do promise I always get back to my voicemails. Sometimes it takes me about a day or so, but I do enjoy talking with people who are in the church, hearing how they're using our software, hearing how we can help them in other ways. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you've got any ideas whatsoever. All right, so a few housekeeping items before we begin. First off, this is scheduled to be an hour-long webinar with 50 minutes for presentation and 10 minutes for questions. Now, excuse me, if there's anything I know about myself, I tend to talk too long on the presentation side, and I shortchange our Q&A. So you'll see in there that within your application where you've joined, there's a place for you to ask questions. Please ask questions as you go. Ask questions throughout, and that way I can kind of see how many questions we have in the queue, and if I need to make sure to cut myself off at 50 minutes, I will. And if we go a little bit over, then that's okay, because I still want to wrap this up within an hour. Now, we are recording this webinar. It will be shared. If you are watching it after the fact, thank you for watching. I'm sorry you couldn't join us live, but you'll still get the value here. And if you are here live right now, thank you for being here. I always enjoy having an audience who I can hear their questions, and we'll have some questions for you as well coming up very briefly. So, if you are not familiar with who Concordia Publishing House is, we are the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and we have been we've been in that role since we started in 1869. So we are active in serving individuals, families, congregations, and schools. I should have listed that on here as well. Schools in their proclamation and learning of the gospel. We have thousands, I think in my group alone there's 11,000 items that we sell of all kinds, all to support your ministry. And so Lutheran Service Builder is one of those things that we produce to help you. So a little bit about Lutheran Service Builder. If you are not familiar with it, and I'm going to find that out from you in just a few moments, Lutheran Service Builder is PC-based software that allows churches to quickly and easily plan services, create custom service folders, that's where we'll focus our attention today, export presentations, and conform with copyright requirements, which is something you may not think of off the top of your head as you think about planning for a service, is the copyrights. But we'll talk about why that's important. So background on Lutheran Service Builder is actually quite fascinating. It was started as an idea during a seminary class assignment. Now, this was back in the early 2000s, and then in 2004 through 2006, Bob Lael, a seminarian, began to develop this. And we've got the story behind that at LutheranServiceBuilder.com. I highly encourage you to watch it. It's fascinating just to see the Lord at work in Bob's life, putting him in the right place at the right time to build a tool that is now used by thousands of congregations. So we released it shortly after the Lutheran Service Book was released in 2006. It's currently being used by about half of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, so it is very well adopted. And we are also presently updating it to be online. Now, I know that may strike a little fear and trepidation in some people, but I've seen where it's headed, and it's fantastic. The team has learned a lot from our customers over the last 10 years about how we can improve it, and some of those have been put in for, right now we're on Lutheran Service Builder 2.0. As we move online, and that'll be in the early part of 2018, as we move online, we'll be able to get these updates out quicker and more efficiently, and be able to allow you to take advantage of the new development as soon as it's ready. So it's exciting times for Lutheran Service Builder. But back to the presentation, and for you specifically, I make a few assumptions about every audience that I have as I present on different topics. So for you, I am assuming that you are new to Lutheran Service Builder. Now, that doesn't mean you're brand new, but at least from a training aspect, you have had informal training at best. Now, if you are completely brand new to Lutheran Service Builder, that is just fine too if you have had no formal or informal training. But I do assume that you are eager to get more out of Builder. If not, you wouldn't dedicate time on a Thursday afternoon to come and watch a webinar. So that's exciting. I hope to provide you with what you're looking for today. Now, I also, oh, and I just saw a question on there, and I will be putting my contact information up one more time. So thank you for asking that. But I also assume, and I assume this with every church audience that I have, I assume you're very busy. I have yet to meet somebody who works in the church either as a called full-time position or even a part-time volunteer position who is not very busy, because the work of the church continues. So I know you're busy. If this is not worthwhile to you, if you already know all of this, or if some interruption comes in, go ahead and step away, take care of what you need to take care of. We are recording this. We'll share it with you after the fact. So we are here to support you, and we try to do that in every way we can. So now it is time for me to ask you a little bit about yourself. So I've got a series of questions. I'll leave them up on the screen for a half a minute or a minute or so. First off, let me launch this. I'd like to ask you what your role in the church is. And this is just selecting the primary role. So many people wear many hats in the congregation. What is your primary role? This will help me understand a little bit more about to whom I'm speaking to get a better idea. And the results are coming in. We've got just about 70% now. It looks like we've got a rather diverse audience today, which is great. So we've got about a third pastors, a third administrators, maybe about 6 musicians, and a little more than that in terms of others. So thank you very much for being here. Yeah, administrative has jumped up to 39%, so very good. So thank you for that. I'm going to go to the next question, which is asking, are you currently using Lutheran Service Builder? Oh, and I have a hanging comma in there. I do apologize for that. I just saw that now. So yes, no, and no, but currently considering it. So I would assume that if you're here and you're not using it, you probably are considering it, but I still put that up there in case you're like, no, I was just told to come here and watch. So good. So we've got the got a pretty good percentage kind of split. Yep, and there's one of the no's. So I know some of my coworkers are watching this today as well. So very good. So a good portion is using it, but we still have a wide number of people who are considering it. So that's great. All right. Lastly, I'm going to ask, what would you consider your Lutheran Service Builder skill level to be? Since we do have a number of people who are currently using this, are you an expert? Are you just advanced? Are you intermediate, novice, or newbie? And if you're an expert, I'm thinking this probably will not be too helpful to you, but I also know we don't have that many experts out there. And it looks like right now we've got about a split between everything's intermediate or below. We've got just about everybody, so it's pretty much well split between intermediate and newbie, with a few that would consider themselves novice. So that's great. All right. Lastly, I'll get into that in just a second. All right, I got one more poll, but we'll get into that. So today, my goal is, oops, there you go. My goal is to help you learn the core features of Lutheran Service Builder by planning a Sunday service. And then we're going to export that to a simple service folder that can be printed and used for a Sunday service. So those are two different things. Planning the service, figuring out all the elements, is the first action. Then exporting it into a printable format and customizing it for your church is going to be the next spot. So that's the third one. Be able to modify the exported services, print or presentation, although we will focus on print today, to meet your needs. So the quick outline, those are the goals. The outline, we're going to plan a Sunday service, looking at the different propers. We have Pentecost coming up, so that's going to be our focus today. We'll talk about the different parts of the liturgy and how that affects planning a service. We're going to review a few of the search techniques. We won't go too in-depth on that. I do that in other training webinars that are recorded and available for you. We're going to prepare the service for print, and that's a step in Lutheran Service Builder, and then we're going to modify the worship folder. We're using Microsoft Word. That's our most common word processor from what we hear from our customers. But we're going to modify it a bit for your church. And so that could go on all day with every different scenario. We're going to just touch on that with a few of the key common things that we hear. And that's where some questions may come in, and depending on how related to Builder they are versus the word processor, I hope to answer those kind of questions for you. So the last aspect we're going to talk about for just a moment or two is copyright management. It's important, but it's not too difficult to understand because of what Lutheran Service Builder does. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to jump over to Lutheran Service Builder and make sure that is showing on your screen. There we go. If this is your first time using Lutheran Service Builder, this is the first screen you'll see when you get in there. And there's a number of different things that are important that are kind of like a dashboard. So we'll start on the far right, actually. Recently opened services and upcoming services. So these are things that you have been working on, so you can quickly get back to it. And this is just a schedule of what's coming up that you know you need to do. Now, when we go to calendars here, that's where you start to plan a service. And this shows you the calendar of the church year. Now, there are going to be events on here that your congregation may not observe or celebrate, and that's okay. We put these in here as a starting point, but we understand that we don't dictate what goes on in your church. And so, like you can see, there's a Pentecost Eve, Pentecost Evening, Pentecost Day. There's even a Pentecost Monday, which I think I may have accidentally got rid of. Pentecost Tuesdays on there as well. But then also throughout the church year, you have like the second Sunday after Pentecost, or Pentecost 3, the third Sunday after Pentecost. Or you'll have observances like Barnabas. When you go to plan a service, you click on the date of that worship service, and then it'll allow you to create it. And your feast, festival, or occasions are available there based on the octave of the church. An octave meaning the 8 days from Sunday to Sunday. And so when something is observed, like Pentecost, that is going to be the primary one. But we'll have something like Pentecost Eve that is not often observed. But if you happen to do it on a Sunday, you could do that. You could observe Pentecost Eve on Pentecost. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. That's probably not proper. But it really comes into play. So let's jump down here to like the 11th. So on the 11th, you could observe Holy Trinity Sunday, or Pentecost Tuesday still in place there, or maybe St. Barnabas the Apostle. Most likely, most of our churches will observe the Holy Trinity, but there may be a special service for that, and so that Sunday you might want to observe St. Barnabas. Those are just some ideas. We generally have a good understanding of what churches typically do, but we do allow for those exceptions. So today we're going to go and plan for June 4th, this coming Sunday. We're going to plan for the day of Pentecost and plan this service. Now, actually, let me go ahead and do that, and I'm going to do one more thing before we get there. So I'll close out of that. We'll come back to that. So these days in the church year, they are based on what lectionary you use, and there's 2 lectionaries, the 1 year and the 3 year. And we do try to keep good record of what our churches use. So I'm going to ask that question real quick. Is what lectionary does your church use? There we go. And I ask this question because as we communicate with our customers, we like to be very much utilizing the same verbiage, the same understanding of your congregation. So if we don't know what we have, we default to 3 year. But if you have 1 year, we really don't need to send you anything related to the 3 year. And it looks like we've got about 1/4 of the attendees using 1 year. That's my highest amount yet. So that's really good. All right, so most are using the 3 year. That's pretty typical, although 1 year seems to really be making a comeback. That was the way of doing it before Vatican II, and 3-year does open up a lot of possibilities, but 1 year provides some great consistency year after year. So, but depending on what you use, that'll change these somewhat. There's a lot of similarities, but you can set your church year under Edit and Preferences, and then go into Locations, and there's a lectionary drop down there. We're running off the 3-year. That's what we're going to be showing today. All right, very good. Day of Pentecost, back here, first step is to plan this service. And so I'll click on the Plan This Service, and it pulls up this window for Choose Your Order of Service. Now, there's a lot of different options here for service types, but most services will be under the Divine Service with 5 different settings. Now, these settings are all from the Lutheran Service Book. The Lutheran Service Book has pulled them from the previous hymnals, Lutheran Worship and the Lutheran Hymnal, as well as the Hymnal Supplement. So setting 4 is from the Hymnal Supplement 98. And then setting 5 is actually a service from Martin Luther. And we've got some great resources coming out in conjunction with the 500th anniversary of the Reformation for Divine Service setting 5. However, today we're going to go with Divine Service setting 1, as I think that's what most people are familiar with. Now, there's other daily offices in there, Matins and Vespers, morning prayer, evening prayer, Compline. Other services like the service of prayer and preaching, which is meant for non-communion services, and things like baptism, confirmation, holy matrimony, some of these things that could be a rite or within a service or their own service themselves. So the goal is not to get into all of those today, but I did want to highlight that. So after that, I'll click in the lower right-hand corner and select OK. Now, what this screen will take you to, it'll be the service plan where I begin to pick what is included in all the different elements. Now, the Divine Service setting 1 has this list of elements and the options, and that's all the way on the left-hand side. Now, each of the Divine Service settings is divided into Confession and Absolution, Service of the Word, and Service of the Sacrament. And we could go into that in more detail, but I have other trainings that really cover that well, so I'm not going to do that today. But you can hit the little box or click the little box next to it to expand or contract. So Confession and Absolution is where we begin, and the first item on there is a hymn of invocation. What Lutheran Service Builder allows you to do is, in these areas where there's options, it provides you intelligent options based on the church year, based on the readings. It provides suggestions. So when we click on Hymn of Invocation, for now, I have this little yellow triangle over on the right that says, you have not chosen a hymn yet. Well, I know that. That's where I'm going next. And so then in the right, I get some options. So we have the Hymn of the Day, which is considered one of the propers. Now, propers are elements of the worship service that are proper for that day in the church year. And so whether you pick the day of Pentecost or, on some weeks where you had Barnabas or Holy Trinity, there will be different propers for each one of those days in the church year, even if they happen to fall on the same day. And so Lutheran Service Builder will provide you with those options so you can choose, but it's an informed decision. So Hymn of the Day is one of the propers, and there is a place for that closer to the sermon. So I'm not going to go for that. Now, below that, we have hymns for the readings. Given that the readings include the readings from Acts, chapter 2, where it tells the story of Pentecost, the receiving of the Holy Spirit, with the flames over the apostles. So you can assume that these hymns for the readings are tied in with Pentecost. If you click on one of these, it'll open that third side there. And oops. Clicked on the wrong thing. There you go, that third side. Now that will show information about the hymn. Now this process, and we'll look at that in a moment, is the same for all worship elements, but hymns are kind of special because there's so much in them, and that's why I like to start with hymns, because it kind of gives you the biggest thing first. So on the far right, you've got these tabs, and you'll have 913, which is the hymn number in Lutheran Service Book. And then you have this opportunity to preview it. Now I don't know if I have my audio up. I know that my audio won't feed from the computer into, let's see, it looks like it's not going to work. Well, anyways, you can preview this into a MIDI file, so it's not high quality, not meant for congregational use, but it is meant to give you an idea of what is this hymn. And then you have the text below that. Now, in addition to the text, on the right you have the melody. And this is where we start getting into customizing your service folder. Because as you see here, Lutheran Service Builder provides text or melody, and while this is not where you go to choose what your service folder has, you can see what's available. Now, some of the hymns will have multiple stanzas, and at a certain point the stanzas just become stanzas become text at the bottom, just like they appear in the hymnal. And that's something that you'll have to pay attention to as we get into the service folders. Okay, next, the third tab is the Info tab. And the Info tab provides all sorts of interesting information about the hymn, including the author and the composer, whether it's text or melody, translation information, copyright information, in this case it's public domain, the tune, which is a fancy German phrase that I don't think I'm going to try to attempt. There's the meter and the key. Now, this is information that is helpful to people who it needs to be helpful for. For me, I'm not a music person. I don't understand. I couldn't look at the tune and understand what that is, partly because I don't fully speak German. But the meter and the key, those don't make too much sense to me. But for an organist, that's key. And so if you're looking for something to be consistent, you could say find all the hymns that have this meter. That's a link there. So this allows you to dig a little bit deeper. Below that is topics, which is very helpful, especially for the, like here, beginning of service. So this is the hymn of invocation. It's tied to the readings, and the topic is related to the beginning of the service, the invocation. So this seems like a very good hymn. So we'll choose it in just a minute, but I want to show even farther, you have under each stanza related Bible verses to the stanzas. And then below that, you have suggested on these different days of the church year. And then you see down below, Pentecost Day, 1 year is selected. And Pentecost Day for the 3 years is also selected. So this is a very appropriate hymn for that time. And like I said, Lutheran Service Builder allows you to make informed decisions by providing you with relevant information. So, of course, the hymn that it suggests will be relevant for this because it's at the top of the list. A couple more things before we move off this part. The fourth tab is your notes section. Now this is your personal notes related to this hymn. So if you are, if you already used this one time and the congregation just stumbles through this, you could put in here something like, might be too difficult for the congregation, or maybe practice a little more next time. I don't know, things like that that are just for you. And they stay with the hymn, so the next time you're planning a service and you're looking at the hymn, you can put your notes in there. Now, again, you don't have to use this because they are for you. It's not a requirement. It's just supposed to be helpful. The last thing is also meant to be helpful is stats. Now, this is a demo database. It hasn't actually been used by churches, so we don't have a lot of usage in here, but this will tell you times used ever and times used this year, and then you can scroll through the calendar and see the last time it was used. But I have no usages of this hymn yet, so there's nothing really to show. But as you plan out services, you want to continue to use hymns that are familiar on a regular basis, but you don't want to use them too frequently. And I know that's a subjective thing, and we could probably have a lot of good discussion on that, what is good and what's not, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So we're going to select this hymn, and there's two ways to select it. I can double-click on the hymn, or I can click and drag and drop under the hymn of invocation. And I like to do that because I get that visual movement on there, and as soon as I do that, the arrow goes away. Okay, so that's how you add a hymn. We're not going to go into that great a detail for everything because we only have so much time today. So below that, in the red, are the rubrics. And so like here, stand, and the sign of the cross may be made by all in remembrance of their baptism. Kneel and stand, silence for reflection of all that. You can choose if you want to include these or not. These are part of the Lutheran Service Book, so they're added to the service plan. But it may be something where your congregation is just in the habit of making the sign of the cross, and you don't need to put that in every time. Or maybe nobody does that, and you don't want to make them feel like they're not following directions by having it in there. You can right-click and rename it or delete it. I'm going to delete that right now. You also have the ability to right-click and click Insert. So if maybe you wanted to put a hymn, so you sit, sing a hymn, you stand and sing a hymn. I don't think that makes sense, but you could do that just by going and putting an insert in there. Okay, so next we have the invocation, and you'll see there is one default invocation right now. And in some cases you only have one option. So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. That is the invocation that we suggest. Now you can also write your own. And we're not going to get into my worship resources today, but that allows you to bring other content either from yourself or from other sources into Lutheran Service Builder. And that's a great topic for another time. That's our advanced users, so that's why we're not going to get into it today. Now next we have exhortation, and again there is there's this default option. I'm getting the spinner, so I think, yeah, there are some other ones, but just from the other divine services. So it's not a proper, so there's not one specifically for Pentecost, so we're just going to go with the default. And if there is a default, it'll pick the default for you. You don't have to go through line by line on every single one of these. Confession of sins is after that, and there are more options of that, although there is still a default, and we're going to leave that there. Absolution or declaration of grace. Now the difference between these is who is leading worship. And so if you are a pastor, then you would have the absolution in there. And if you are a vicar, you would have the declaration of grace. If you're not ordained, or the person who's leading this aspect of the service, or maybe the whole service is not ordained, you would go with declaration of grace. But for this example, we're going to go with absolution because that's most familiar. Yeah, we did talk, confession of sins has a default, then absolution comes there. So that's the confession and absolution section. Now we get into the service of the word, and this is where propers really come into play. So first we have the introit, psalm, or entrance hymn. Now it's up to how you and your congregation use it if the entrance hymn is included, because the hymn of invocation is different, but often when there is a hymn of invocation, there is not an entrance hymn. And so you could choose to go with the introit. So here's the introit, which is a proper introit for the day of Pentecost. That's what we would recommend, or at least I would recommend. I don't want to speak for everybody who's here at the publishing house. So we're going to go with that. You could also do the psalm, and that is a, actually I don't believe that one is a, no it is. There we go, that's a proper. So introit is what we're going to go for. Then you've got the Kyrie, and you've got some options in there, some directly from the hymnal, like where it's fully sung, but we're going to go with the default, which is a responsorial. The hymn of praise is next, and you can go with Gloria in Excelsis, or This is the Feast. I'm going to go for Gloria in Excelsis. And then you have the salutation and the collect of the day. And there is a proper for the collect, the prayer there, and so we'll go for that for Pentecost. Old Testament reading, there's a default for that, although as you look in here at these readings, you can see that the other days within the octave show up there, the visitation, Pentecost Eve, Pentecost evening, so you have those options available. In this case, we have the second reading, which the default is Acts, which is the story of Pentecost. I would recommend going with that if you are observing Pentecost that day, which most of our congregations are. You have the Alleluia and the verse, and you can see here, maybe, I hope you can see, I know it's going to be a little small on your screen, but there is the common Alleluia in the verse. There is a verse for Lent, although we're not in Lent at this time, that is used sometimes elsewhere, depending on the tone of the service. But there's a verse of the day for Pentecost, and that's what we're going to go for. And lastly, there's the Holy Gospel assigned for Pentecost, and so we'll go with that. That's the default. All right, then rubric for sit. Hymn of the day is next, which we already have up here, so we'll drag and drop that. We could also double click. Sermon follows that. Following the sermon, there's the creed, and depending on who your congregation does it, I think it's probably typical, or at least recommended, or at least typical, that on services where Holy Communion is offered, it's the Nicene Creed. Although if you are a congregation that offers Holy Communion every Sunday, which is a great blessing, you may mix it up so that you have Nicene and Apostles vary, probably saving the Athanasian Creed for Trinity, which is coming up shortly. All right, then we have prayers for prayer of the church. Now you'll notice that there's no suggestions here, and every church does things a little bit different when it comes to the prayers. But as we talk about saving time and building your worship folder, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod has something that they offer their congregations called Let Us Pray. And we work with them, and on a regular basis, they provide us those files, these prayers for the church, or prayers of the church, and we convert it into Builder format so you can use them in Builder. So if you visit LutheranServiceBuilder.com and you scroll to the bottom of the page and click Downloads, it's in our lower links because that's not real common. I'll tell you why in a second. It'll take you to this where you can get the Let Us Pray files. And in fact, we should probably remove some of the older ones just because those aren't as practical anymore. But we have the Let Us Pray files for the day of Pentecost. Now, there's not one for every single day in the church year, but for the common ones. And so Day of Pentecost is offered, and there's 3 year. Now, the reason we kind of keep this out of the way, kind of hidden, it's not helpful to people who are considering Lutheran Service Builder until they actually get into the Builder. So we don't want to distract it. But we also, and I think it's hidden on this form because I already signed up, when you go there, you can sign up to receive email updates about this. So, and we contextualize a lot of things for the audience. I believe that's why it's, the form is not showing up there. If the form's not showing up for you, then you can email me and I'll make sure you get them and I'll fix the form. But we're going to go to Day of Pentecost and 3 year and click on that. And now it's going to download a file. And you can see it has downloaded in here. It's a zip file. And when I click on the zip file, it opens it up like a folder. And I can double click. It says June 4th, 2017. I'll double click on it and it'll seem like nothing happened, except you can see that my taskbar shows up and Builder is blinking. So I'll go back to Builder, still nothing's there. If I click on Write My Own, now I have June 4th in here, and there's prayers of the church that I can use. Now I can go and modify this and I can write my own, but it has given me a really good starting point. And I know many of our LCMS congregations use this. You don't have to be LCMS. For one, you don't have to be LCMS to use Builder. You also don't have to be LCMS to use these prayers of the church, because they are for the Church of Christ, not the Church of Lutherans. So that is available for you. We're going to move that over and put that here so prayers of the church are now available. Now, there's another rubric in here. I'm going to leave that in. It's a little bit detailed about the peace be with you, reconciliation, and all of that good stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but that is a rubric that you may or may not include. It's your choice. Then we have the offering and the offertory, and there are suggestions for that, although there's also a default. And that completes the service of the Word. Now we have the service of the sacrament. And I do apologize for going through this quickly. There is a lot of material to cover. So most of the principles that we've learned, we can apply the rest. And so I'm going to go down here and we have the preface and the proper preface. And that is a proper, it's in the name. So there's one for the day of Pentecost, which is selected by default. The Sanctus, the prayer of thanksgiving, the word of our Lord. And I call this out because it's got some seemingly odd naming conventions. So left column and right column. That actually in the hymnal makes a lot more sense in Lutheran Service Book because you have it on different sides of the page. And so here this is just referring back to that. I prefer the right column where the Lord's Prayer comes before the words of the Lord. Then you have the Pax Domini, the Agnus Dei, and then distribution with the rubrics in there. During the distribution of the Lord's Supper, there are distribution hymns. And this is where it's always good to go and see what's suggested. You already know it's being used. So we'll go to a few of these other ones. So Come Holy Ghost Creator Bless. And then let's see, Holy Spirit, the Dove Sent from Heaven. And we'll double click on that to add that in. Oops, I was on the wrong one. So there we go. We'll add both of those in. Then we've got the Post-Communion Canticle. Thank the Lord and sing His praise. And lastly, the Post-Communion Collect, where there's a default selected, as well as the benediction. And the benediction also has some other options there for you. So we have planned the service. I know I'm already at 1:36, so it seemed to go by really quickly. It's actually pretty fast, especially for those of you who work in the church and do this on a regular basis. I'm sure you understand that that's a pretty quick process to plan that out. But it doesn't mean anything unless we have something to export, and that's where we're going to move next. So going back to the subject of time saving for worship planning, when you look at all of these suggestions that you've made, the way that the lectionary with the propers already makes it kind of a time saver. You're not having to write all of this. You've got these options already made, but with Builder you can quickly pull those predefined options and plug them in. You now have basically an entire service planned. So I can go here to this next icon up at the top where it says prepare a bulletin for your service. When I hover over it, it looks like a bulletin. When I click on that, it takes me to a slightly different view. You have this big copyright symbol on here telling us that there is copyrighted material in here. We'll talk about that in a bit. But now it takes that service plan that I have and breaks it down into actual real elements in their entirety. And so you can see there's my hymn, there is the invocation, there's the confession and absolution, the service of the word begins, and you have the introit and then the readings. And we go and scroll down. So all of that in one long single column. Well, now we can begin to prep it for the bulletin. And this is where we start making very practical decisions about how it exports. So let's look at the hymn first to see what our options are. When you click on the hymn, you can choose to have the text showing like we have now, or the melody. And when you click on the melody, you can see now that changes. It's an image rather than just text. Now let's say you only want to do 2 verses. To the right of that you have stanzas. And so you can select all, select clear all, go to 1 and 3, and when you do that, it'll change it even within the image. If you go back to text, it still changes it to that. So this is where you can start thinking, how do we do it in our church? Do we keep the melody? The other thing you do is uncheck melody and just have the title. And so if your practice in your church is to pick up the Lutheran Service Book from the pew, open it up and sing from there, you can still do that without taking up this bulletin space. And so you're saving paper, you're saving yourself time. If you can cut down on some pages, that's fewer that you have to print, fewer that you have to staple. Or if you don't want to always have to pick up the hymnal, you can put the entire melody in there based on the stanzas. So it's really flexible based on your church and what you need. All right, I'm going to continue to go down here and look at a few others. So like here in the introit, there is some pointing in here. So if you were to chant it or play music along with it, you can remove that just by unchecking pointing up at the top. And then you could, if you want to chant, include pointing and add a psalm tones to it. And these are a number of psalm tones, which, again, I'm not a music person. These don't mean anything to me looking at them, but for those of you who are, I'm sure it makes a lot of sense. So if you're going to put the psalm tone in, I recommend that you also put the pointing in there as well. All right, going down a little bit more. All right, we can see, here's the next hymn. So in this hymn, again, you have that options so that you can choose how you want it to display. Now, just because I chose the hymn up at the top to be in the melody doesn't mean they all follow into that. And so you do have to change those individually, unless you start setting up default formats. And that's where we're going to go today in terms of making your life easier. So I'll stop scrolling. I know that's going to be distracting. Sorry about that. We can go into up here where it says default, and it's got these different kinds of formats for you. So you can say title only, and it just gives you this very big or very small outline list with just all the elements in there. You could say maybe text only, and it converts all of it into that form of just text. You may say just verses, and so it it says hymn of invocation, but it doesn't title it for you. It just gives you the verses. You have this option to edit your own service formats and put your defaults in there. So like here, hymns, you could say show hymns. I want to do the melody, and you've got caption options, show all captions. Caption format, you could call it the opening hymn. You could do the name of the hymn, and it gives you this nice preview to show what that means. You've got the ability to do readings in a certain format, propers, and liturgy as well. So that's one way to save time. If you know that you are always going to do the melody, that you always want it to display, set that as your default. You could even modify these in there, but if you want to do something, and so it's like my church, you click new and click my church and save it, and now we begin to pick our preferences. Captions is another thing where you've got this ability, like here you can do the page number, you can do the package, the selected stanzas, or maybe the related scripture references. You can customize it to show what you want it to show in the top right corner of the hymn. So that's one way to customize, and that saves a lot of time. You know, especially if you have 4 or 5 hymns a week, you're not having to go and modify each one of them to meet your needs. Now, we're talking about theme in a second, but let me show you where we're going from here. So we've done a good job of getting this to how we want it to be. Actually, here is a hymn that has Spanish in it, which is great, but most congregations don't sing everything in English and then everything in Spanish. They may alternate between one in English, one in Spanish. So we could do that and put it in place in this way, and the melody does display for the English, not for the Spanish. Or most likely you're not going to do any Spanish unless it's a Spanish service, in which case you won't do any English. So we'll just go down to those 4 stanzas. But now where we can go from here is we can do save as and save it as a document. And I'll just go ahead and hit save. It's going to save it to my desktop. And I'm looking over here, we got a lot of questions. I'm sorry I haven't been answering as we go, but I will plan on answering these at the end. And we're in decent shape for time. There's still plenty we can talk about. Okay, so I'm going to go down to desktop, and it has saved it as a Word document for me. And that will hopefully open in just a second. It did. Where did it go? There we go. And here is my Word document. So you can see now everything, formatting included, has been exported to Word. Now, I know in talking with customers that sometimes this is the step that you stop at using Builder, stop using Builder and move into using Word. Well, what I would recommend is do it the first time. Get it out to Word, see what you're working with here. Now, you can see, okay, you got 15 pages. I see I made this melody and I made this text only. I've got some things to clean up. So your first pass, you see what you need to do, X out. The other thing I saw that was 8.5 by 11. I want to change my layout, which is in the top right corner. Change my layout to be the legal size. So 11 by 7, or 8.5 by 14, sorry, is legal size. So 14 width, 8.5 height. Click OK. That way, each page is 7 inches wide. Now, that automatically changes this preview to give you a better idea of where the line breaks are. So now, I'm going to go back in. I was playing around with that. I'm going to switch it to be just text only. And that changes based on that template. And I really don't like the font color, font selections, because my church uses Arial, and or maybe you have a different one. So under here, under UI default, you have a variety of different options. Now, there's some fun ones. There's the default view. You've got the large print, no formatting, Times New Roman, creative worship. There's a lot that we could talk about with creative worship, and I think I saw a question come up in there. I'll answer that during the Q&A time. But that's a style in there, and that actually is an Arial style. So if I wanted to go with that, I could. Now when I click on it, it updates everything, and you see that now my fonts are Arial, and the spacing is a little bit different, and it feels very much like Creative Worship and the export that we do in that product. Creative Worship, by the way, is a worship planning tool that has lots of, excuse me, lots of great content in it, music and artwork and other things that come directly into Lutheran Service Builder. But that's we'll get into that in a little bit more detail during the Q&A, although that we could spend a whole webinar on that, and probably will at some point in the near future. But I can also go here to the theme and go to Edit Style Sheets and say New Theme, and we'll do My Church. And let's say I want to go really contemporary. Now I've got a number of fonts on my computer. And normally I have to talk about, well, if you have a font on your computer, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a font on another one. But as we talk about planning services, usually it's one person who does the final export. So Oswald is one of my favorite, more modern fonts. And then Roboto is one of my other ones. So I start selecting the different elements and then choosing a font. So there's Roboto, and I'm going to do Roboto there. I can preview how this is going to look for my church. And I know that many churches follow the same format year after year after year. And change is rough on congregations, especially in the bulletin, something you're used to every single week. So I understand that's a big change. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my rubrics are red, although I'm going to go darker red for that. And then you can see here that, like, if I want to do maybe my scripture in blue, just the captions, and it'll do a dark blue just to make it stand out. Or maybe let's go gray. Here we go. So it's there, but it's not super noticeable. And then maybe I want to make this a little bit bigger. It's 10.5 font right now. I can go 11 or even 12. If I go 12 there, I should go 14 here. That's looking there. Then you got positions available. So like here, this is indented to the left. I don't want that indented at all. I want a little bit more space before paragraphs, so I'll add that in there. And yeah, it's starting to look good. I'm going to go with this just because I could tinker with this all day, but I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now that'll update everything, and we're going from Creative Worship view, and now here's my custom view. And so you can see my colors are in there, my fonts are in there, my light gray on the caption. Once you save this and create this once, you can apply this again and again and again. You're not having to go in there every time, and you're not doing it in Word. So now, when I go to Save As, and I save it, I'll overwrite my old file. Do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. And if I go into, I got my desktop linked here so I don't have to minimize everything. I'll open up that service, and it'll take a second. Here we go. It's a little slow. That's my Microsoft Word. Apparently I have enough plugins in there that it's taking time. I don't know why it's taking so much time here. There we go. And you see everything is exactly as I planned for it to be exported. So I've got my fonts in here. I've got my colors appropriate. And now I'm at 17 pages. And so from here I may tinker with it some more and say, you know, I need to cut out some stuff. Or maybe I'll format it in another way. So for example, maybe you decide that you don't need the whole Lord's Prayer written in there. And you can just say Lord's Prayer. And maybe other weeks you would do it, but this week, or you'd include it, but this week, because you're trying to get down to a certain page number, you don't. And you can make changes here as well on like stanzas and say, okay, we're not going to do 5 and 6 today. Now, this does not flow back into Builder, and so we do recommend, as you're doing this, you might make these changes. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is set up a worship service folder that might fit into like a booklet format. And for those of you who are into desktop publishing, which if you're here for service folder, I would assume is everybody, you know that in booklets, it's best to go in quantities of 4 pages because each sheet has a half, each side of the sheet has a half, and 4 halves equal, or 2 sheets with 2 halves equal 4 pages per piece of paper. That's what I was going for. I think I jumbled that up a little bit. So we're at 17 pages right now. If I want to get to 16, I have to cut more, but really I could go to 20 and make it work. So I could go something like this and say, make this my cover, the day of Pentecost, and I'm going to use my my fun creative worship art that I've already pre-selected. That's a shameless plug for another product, but I'll go ahead and show you. So if you need some art for your bulletin, you may also be using our Every Sunday Bulletin series, which would have artwork there. And now we can format it as we want. And so maybe I want to add in the church name and say, you know, Christ Lutheran Church in, oops, I should probably spell it right, Church in Bakersville, Missouri. Don't look that one up on the map. That's not going to come up. But we start having this very nice service, and looks like I've got that in the same paragraph. And so I want to have this as the outside cover. I'm going to do an inside cover. Oops. And then I'll start with the service in here. And I'm up to 19 pages, which is fantastic because that means that I go into the inside cover, and maybe I'll drop this down and make all the acknowledgments. These are the copyright lines. That is important. And I'll go here, add a new page. I'm at 20 pages, and this may be where I do like my serving today, and bump that up to Oswald, and that's where you could put the pastor and the elders and the organist and all that. So now I have this great, quick and easy booklet, and then when I go to print, and I'll print it to a PDF so you can see it. And this time always takes a little bit. When I'm doing a webinar, it seems to slow down my resources on my computer. So there we go. I can go to page setup and make sure that I'm still in book fold, and it's landscape. It's got all of my modifications to the template done, and I will print it to PDF. I can also print it out here to my physical printer and show you, but it's not going to be as good, and it won't show how it works. So I'm going to just put that here real quick. And while that generates, I'm going to jump back into Builder. I saw the question come across about PowerPoints. And this is what's really nice, is that next to the bulletins, you've got PowerPoints. So you can prepare a presentation of your service and click it there. And a lot of the same things that I talked about on the print side apply to the display side, the presentation side. So you can see you've got your outline here. Whoops. We'll come back to that just a second. You've got your outline here of all of your service elements, but then the theme and the format, so text and melody and stanzas, and all of that is still the same. You can even change your layout here for the width of the slides, the margins, and then do the same kind of thing where it's save as. So in a future webinar, we'll get in more detail on presentation, since I'm already over my time, as I promised, or warned would probably be a better term. Let's go here quickly and show. This is my PDF printout. So here is the outside cover, the back and on the front, that when you fold it becomes a nice booklet. Here is the here is the inside front cover and the inside back cover where our acknowledgments is. Then we have, it's flipped. This is in the back, and then this is your first page. So it's done so you can print it two-sided and then fold it, and everything works out into your nice, neat booklet. And so from a formatting perspective, we had to tweak it a little bit, but those are based on our preferences. And we could always do that in Builder too and set that as part of our theme. So that is the presentation for exporting. I do want to get into copyrights real briefly, because this is important to know at this stage. Now, you saw when I was going to export that big copyright symbol, that warning that says there's copyrighted material. Well, when we introduced Lutheran Service Builder a number of years ago, before Lutheran Service Builder, it wasn't really an issue with copyrights because everybody had the hymnal in front of them. And sure, you could go to the photocopy machine, which back then we called Xerox, and photocopy it and distribute it, and that was illegal. Like, that was not allowed unless those specific copyrights permitted that. So when we got to Builder and we said, here, go ahead, print these out, we introduced a problem as well as a solution. So the solution for that is that we track all of your hymn usage. So we allow churches to print copyrighted materials. As part of the fee, we provide the automated reported to the copyright holders and their royalties. So this allows us to get these statistics, allows you to see the statistics for your church. But you may be saying, why is this important? I want to plan a worship service. I don't want to get into copyrights and all that. Well, it's important for a couple reasons. One, it's a commandment. Seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. It's stealing intellectual property. It's distributing things you do not have the right to distribute. But with Lutheran Service Builder, we make that right for you. You do have to pay for it. It's part of your subscription. And then you are able to use it in the way. And this is also important because it provides the compensation to the copyright holders. This allows music in the church to continue so that these composers, these authors, they can get compensated for their work so they can continue to provide beautiful music for the church. So it all ties back to the mission. This is why we provide it, but Builder will do that for you. So I want to be sure to clarify that. Man, I've really cut into our time. I do apologize for that. Let me go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is the URL. You can go lutheranservicebuilder.com if you are one of those who's considering using it and you'd like to download a free trial. The free trial will allow you to do everything that we talked about today except export it for use. You've got those copyright symbols on it. So it lets you get familiar with the software, and if you decide to move forward with it, you can subscribe, and then it opens up those other options. Here is my contact information again. I know that was asked before. I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a few minutes as I look at the questions that are in there. And it looks like we got a good group of questions, so I do apologize if I go over a few minutes. So first of all, thank you to those of you who, before we started, said that the sound and audio was working well. I appreciate that. And then Anne asked if I could put my contact information before the end of the program, so I got that. Anne also asked, are there other denominations using LSB and Lutheran Service Book and Lutheran Service Builder? Well, yes, there are. I think they're predominantly all Lutheran, which makes sense, although they may not all be LCMS. And so I do know that there are other churches that use it, but it's in the minority. But that's a church decision. We can't really influence that because most denominations will have their preferred hymnal. Now, I can tell you we've had discussions about possibly rolling Builder out with other denominations and working with them to bring in their hymnal into a version for themselves. That's years away. Those are very early, and I don't know if it's going to work out, but we're really excited about the possibility. And so then more and more people might be able to use it, but it would be different. And because Lutheran Service Builder is so tied in with Lutheran Service Book, you really have to adopt that hymnal first for usage, even if by adopting, you're adopting Lutheran Service Builder. So there's a lot more to it than just the software. All right. And let's see here. Can you show again where you get the tree year and the 1 year thing from the settings? Absolutely, Alexis, I can show you that. So let me go back into Builder. I'll come back to my contact information if you still need that later on. Up under the, well, let me go to the home page first. You can go to the home page, or you can click this calendar icon, and when you click on that, that gets you the church year. I'll show a cool tool in a minute. You can go to Edit and Preferences, or just press F4. And then you go to Locations, and Lectionary is under that. So Edit, Preferences, then click the Locations tab, and you have the 3-year lectionary, or the lectionary, 1 year, 3 year. Now let me show you another fun thing, and it's free. Let's see, here we go. If you go in your web browser to lutherancalendar.org, it will take you to a free church year provided by Concordia Publishing House. And when I say a free church year, I shouldn't say that. The platform to view the church year is free. The church year is always free, obviously. It's a concept, it's an idea, it's not a product. So here we'll go to Pentecost Day, and when you click on it, it'll get you the propers for the day. So you'll see the readings there, there's the psalm, you've got down below the introit, the collect, the gradual, and the verse. So, and you can toggle between 1 year and 3 year in the top right. So if you want to see what the 1 year is all about, you can toggle to 1 year, and I'm going to go back. and there's my calendar, 1 year calendar, because Pentecost Monday's on the 1 year. That's the difference. That's what I'm missing. So that's free. You can get it on your phone. It looks great on the phone. It's a great way, especially for like devotional readings. And if you want to learn more about the church year, I encourage you to go to todayinthechurchyear.org. Another shameless plug, this is a blog that we produce. Every day there's an event in the church year. So today is commemorating the martyr Justin, which I didn't know a lot about Justin before I reviewed this post. It's interesting to learn these things. So I encourage you to do that too. That is todayinthechurchyear.org. Okay, so Marcia asked, has New Reformation hymn Through All Our Life is Like a Scroll, or Though All Our Life is Like a Scroll, sorry, has that been added? We haven't added hymns to Lutheran Service Builder because it's based on the hymnal, although using my worship resources, which like I mentioned before is a little bit outside the scope, you can add that in. And in some cases, especially with creative worship, we'll have new hymns as files that can be shared in there. Now, we've talked about different ways of how we can make that available. We've got a number of things in the works for how we can roll new music out in the various formats. So stay tuned for things like that. We're not ready to release anything yet. It's going to be some time, but as we're figuring out different ways to make life easier in the congregation while still sharing this great music that we produce here. Those are the kind of things we discuss. So I don't have a good solution for you today. We do have the ability to add that in, and I can help you through that, or our support team can help you through that as well. Anne had that same related question, are service elements able to be added or edited? Yes, they can be edited, and that can be from this planning view as well as, so if you want to remove or delete or add, you can do that there. If you want to change things within here, like the header, you can do that as well. I would also suggest, if you're wanting to make a permanent change, you do have to create a new worship element, so you can copy and paste into that. If you want to make a temporary change, it may be best to just do that from the bulletin view once you export it. That's quick and easy because you're not going to reuse it again. So it depends. There's a number of different ways you can go about it. But if you want to take something, modify it and use it again and again, My Worship Resources, which is this fourth tab here, is the best way to go. And that's kind of complex. That's our advanced user area. Jan asked about what about the use of creative worship for the Lutheran parish. That is a fantastic tool that I didn't realize how great it was until I moved into our music team. And all of the files and resources that are there are available to be imported into Lutheran Service Builder. And one of our recorded trainings goes into that in far more detail than I can go in right now. But just know that whether it's music or words, in fact the whole service can be brought in, and then you can pick and choose what you would use, like our creative worship customers do. So then we have the question about the PowerPoint, which we covered that. I hope I covered that in enough detail for today. Is there a template for that last page too, people involved in the service? There is not at this time, as we're focusing on the actual elements of the service. And that's why I call it service folder rather than bulletin, because bulletin gets into news and announcements. And what you may do is have a separate template that you keep for that, and you merge the two each week, where you just bring the pages over. It's easy to copy and paste with Word. So that's what I would recommend. We're talking about other options. That won't be something that we release with the online version, but we're talking about how can we make it easier to do things. So I appreciate you asking for that. That tells me that there's a need. If you have any other suggestions, you can feel free to send it to me. There's my contact information again. But right now there's not a way to do that. And Marcia asks, is there a way for Builder to format alternate readings by verse between pastor and congregation, specifically for the Psalms? That is a very good question that I can't answer off the top of my head. I may have to get back to you on that one, because I know there are ways, but I know that it might be limited to certain Psalms that are set up for the liturgy. In fact, as I look here, I'm not seeing the quick and easy way. Now, you can absolutely save these as my worship resources and do that yourself. So that does not answer the easy question. So it can be done. I'll get back to you on that, Marcia, and I'll make sure to follow up and see if there's something I'm missing. Some of these questions I'm very good with Builder. I'm not the absolute expert in our Builder. We've got people who actually wrote the code who can answer that better than me. So Jane asked about a version for MacBook Pro. That will be when the version for the online version becomes available, or you could run this on a Windows application, or an application that allows you to run Windows devices or apps on your Mac computer. But the online version, of course, will be available on any kind of device with an internet connection. And then Robert Peters asked, does Lutheran Service Builder have any page number capabilities? No, it actually doesn't, because when you are going into that service folder format, you've got this long column, because when you export it out to your word processor like Word, that's where you can insert the page numbers and format it accordingly. But here, it's just trying to get you the content out, and then there in the word processor is where you finalize it. All right, where do we find these other training resources on Lutheran Service Builder and how to use it? I think that's so our last question, and it's a great segue into wrapping up for today. So if you go to LutheranServiceBuilder.com, and in the top, you go to training. Let's see, my internet's going a little slow today, so please pardon the delay. When you click on training, you'll have the opportunity to sign up for other webinars, and many of them will be similar. My goodness, that is really slow. Let me close some of these other things. Our websites normally are not this slow. There we go. So we've got other things we've got coming up. We've got a few more overview webinars. That'll be about an 80% overlap in content. We'll focus a little bit different in the coming ones on like preparing music or planning the worship service. That's more geared towards pastors as they look at the elements. But we had this series of hour-long webinars on each section. And you can go in here and like adding additional worship elements to Lutheran Service Builder is the title of our advanced user one. And you can go in here, and this is one that I led. I believe this one's from February. And we spend a significant amount of time going through my worship resources and all those specific details. So this is about 4+ hours worth of training in these 4 videos that really go in depth on all these different topics. So I would recommend that you take a look at that. If you want to learn more, it kind of goes from beginning user all the way to advanced over the course of these 4. The beginning user one talks a lot about the liturgy in the church and why you would use these different elements or how you would use them. And then as we get into from builder to bulletin, that talks about many of the things we talked about today. But then advanced worship service planning gets into a variety of different topics that we couldn't cover today because they're advanced. They're not necessary for a service folder, but they are helpful. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap up. I'll thank you again for being here. I apologize for going over my time. We had some really great questions, and as you can tell, I get excited about this material. It's a lot of fun showing off Builder. It is not something that I've had significant experience in, and so it's still new and exciting to me, as I'm sure it is for you as well. So I'll go back up here one more time, and if you're interested in reaching me, there's my contact information. If you're interested in getting started with a software consultant who can help you implement it in your congregation, you can call that number or email there. And then our website, if you're already a user, already subscribed, and you just need some help, you can go into the support tab and call our support team, and they can help you as well. They are far better to answer detailed, specific questions than I am, because that is what they do day in and day out. And so they're more readily available than me. In fact, I should probably, we'll see how how long the website takes. Because that was going slow. That's quickly. So there's our contact, our support is on the side there, and also the Help Center, which has lots of great resources too. So that's at LutheranServiceBuilder.com. Go over to Contact, and for you, if you're already a customer, it may jump over to the left-hand side because we do modify it based on who's watching the site. So, all right, thank you once again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.